The truth did not arrive gently for Liam Spencer. It came the way most irreversible truths do in his life, without warning, without preparation, and without the smallest allowance for emotional stability. One moment, he was still trying to convince himself that his marriage with Hope Logan had survived enough fractures to remain intact. The next, he was standing in front of her, watching her deliver a confession that shattered every remaining illusion he had been holding on to. Hope did not look triumphant when she said it. That was the first thing that made it worse. She looked exhausted, like someone who had already been carrying the weight of the truth long before deciding to speak it out loud. "I'm pregnant," she said. The words should have brought joy. They should have carried relief, possibility, renewal. But they did not, because she did not stop there. Her eyes dropped for a brief second, as if the next sentence was heavier than the first. "And you're not the father." For a moment, Liam did not respond. Not because he did not understand, but because understanding arrived too quickly, too completely, and his mind refused to translate it into emotional reaction immediately. He blinked once, then again, as if repetition might soften meaning. It did not. "Hope," he said finally, his voice quieter than he intended. But she was already shaking her head. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she whispered. Liam felt something inside him tighten. Not anger yet, not fully, but something more disorienting. Displacement. Because truth, when it contradicts assumed reality, does not simply add information. It replaces identity. "Then who?" he asked. Hope hesitated, and that hesitation was not small. It was structural. "It doesn't matter," she said quickly. But that was not an answer. It was avoidance. And Liam had lived long enough in relationships to know the difference. He did not leave immediately. That was important later, because the human mind often tries to stabilize itself by remaining physically present in spaces that have already emotionally collapsed. Hope walked away first, not running, not fleeing, just leaving the room as though continuing conversation would cause further damage she could no longer afford. Liam stayed behind for several seconds, looking at nothing, listening to silence that now felt redefined. Then he followed, not because he had clarity, but because uncertainty demanded motion. He did not confront her immediately again. Instead, he watched, not intentionally at first, but instinctively. Hope left the house later that evening, saying she needed air. Her tone was careful, controlled, too controlled. That alone made Liam uneasy, because emotional truth rarely arrives with control intact. He followed her at a distance, not close enough to be seen, not far enough to lose track. And as the city passed around him in blurred motion, something inside him began to shift from grief into suspicion. Not because he wanted it to, but because unanswered questions always evolve into interpretation when silence persists too long. Hope did not go somewhere random. She went somewhere deliberate. A parking structure on the edge of town, partially empty, lit unevenly by overhead lamps that flickered intermittently, as though even infrastructure could not fully commit to consistency in that part of the city. Liam parked at a distance, watched, waited, and then he saw her. Hope was already there, standing near a vehicle that was not hers. Her posture was different now, not composed, not controlled, but fractured. And in front of her stood a man Liam did not immediately recognize. Remy Price. The name came later, but the image came first. A young man. Confident posture, but something unstable beneath it. The kind of instability that does not announce itself immediately, but reveals itself in how someone occupies space when they believe they're not being evaluated. Hope was crying, not quietly, not contained, but fully, emotionally unfiltered in a way Liam had not seen from her in a long time. "Please," she said, voice breaking. "You have to understand." Remy did not respond immediately. He looked at her, not unkindly, but not sympathetically either. That absence of emotional alignment was what made the moment feel dangerous. Liam stepped closer, hidden partially behind structural support. And then he heard her clearly. "I'll give you anything you want," Hope said. "Just don't tell him." A pause. Remy's voice was calm. "Tell him what?" Hope shook her head quickly. "That you're the father," she said. The words did not land like information. They landed like collapse. Liam froze, not physically, but internally, because the sentence did not require interpretation, only acceptance. And acceptance, in that moment, was impossible. Remy did not immediately react with shock. That was the second detail Liam noticed. He looked resigned, as if this conversation had already been anticipated in some form. "You're asking me to disappear," Remy said finally. Hope stepped forward. "No," she said quickly. "I'm asking you to protect everything I still have." Remy's expression tightened slightly. "And Liam doesn't deserve the truth?" Hope's voice cracked. "Liam deserves peace," she said. "And so do I." There was a silence after that. A long one. The kind that expands rather than empties. And in that silence, Liam felt something inside him fracture further. Not just betrayal, but recontextualization. Because now the narrative was no longer confusion. It was concealment. He stepped back without realizing it. A small movement, but enough to shift his position. A sound. Hope turned sharply, and for a brief second, their eyes met across distance and shadow. Everything stopped. Hope's face changed instantly. Fear, recognition, panic. "Liam," she started, but he was already moving away. Not running, not confronting, just leaving. Because confrontation requires emotional grounding, and Liam no longer had any. Later, he replayed the scene repeatedly in his mind. Not the emotional content, but the structure. Hope crying, Remy listening, the exchange of request and refusal, the bargaining tone, the desperation. And beneath it all, the most important realization. This was not spontaneous confession. It was negotiation, and negotiation implies history. Back at the Spencer estate, Liam did not speak for a long time. Bill Spencer noticed immediately that something had changed in him. Not visibly, but structurally. The kind of change that does not alter behavior first. It alters interpretation. "What happened?" Bill asked eventually. Liam did not answer immediately, because answering would make it real. But silence no longer protected him. So finally he spoke. "Hope is pregnant," he said. Bill raised an eyebrow slightly. "That's good news," he replied instinctively. Liam shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "It's not mine." That stopped everything. Even Bill. Because betrayal in Spencer households is not unfamiliar. But this was different. This was layered, strategic, concealed, intentional. "What are you saying?" Bill asked. Liam looked up at him. "I think she's been lying," he said. A pause, then added, "for a long time." Bill studied him carefully now. "And you know who the father is?" Liam hesitated. That hesitation mattered, because certainty had not fully formed yet. But suspicion already had. "I think it's someone named Remy Price," he said finally. Bill did not react immediately. Not because he was unaffected, but because he was calculating. And calculation is slower than emotion. "This could get complicated," Bill said finally. Liam laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "It already is." Meanwhile, Hope returned home later that night. But she was not alone internally. She was carrying awareness now. Awareness that Liam had seen something, or at least suspected it. And once suspicion enters a relationship, it does not remain static. It evolves. It expands. It demands resolution. Remy, on the other hand, did not leave town. That detail would matter later. Because people who stay after being introduced to secrets are never passive participants. They become potential leverage points, or threats, depending on perspective. Hope sat alone in her room that night, staring at nothing. Not crying anymore, because grief had already transformed. Now, it was anticipation, not of discovery, but of consequence. Because lies, once initiated, do not end with silence. They end with exposure. And exposure, in her world, always comes with collateral damage. Liam stood outside later, alone in the quiet night air. He did not feel anger yet. That would come later. What he felt now was something more unstable. Disintegration of trust as a framework for understanding reality. And once that framework collapses, everything built upon it becomes suspect. Even love, even history, even memory. And somewhere in the distance, without knowing it yet, 3 lives were already beginning to reorganize themselves around a truth that would not remain hidden for long. Liam Spencer did not confront Hope immediately after what he had seen. Not because he lacked courage, but because courage in moments like this does not solve anything. It only accelerates collapse. He stood outside the Spencer estate for a long time that night, the air cool against his skin, his thoughts looping through the same unbearable sequence again and again. Hope's tears, Remy's calm expression, the word "don't tell him" hanging in the air like a final seal on something already corrupted. By the time he walked inside, something in him had already shifted, not toward acceptance, toward fracture. Hope sensed it immediately when she saw him. People who share intimacy for long enough develop an instinct for emotional weather. Not perfect accuracy, but recognition of pressure changes. And when Liam entered the room, there was no softness in his presence. No confusión, no hesitación, only controlled stillness. Hope stood slowly. "Liam," she began, but he did not respond right away. He looked at her the way someone looks at a structure that has just been revealed to have hidden instability. Then he spoke. "I saw you." The words were simple, but they did not need elaboration. Hope's face drained of color instantly. For a brief moment, she looked like she might deny it. That instinct always comes first when truth is still negotiable. But there was nothing left to negotiate. Her shoulders dropped slightly, and when she spoke, her voice broke immediately. "It wasn't what you think." Liam let out a short, humorless breath. "I think I saw you begging another man not to tell me he's the father of your child," he said quietly. "That's pretty specific." Hope shook her head quickly. "No, Liam, listen to me," but he raised a hand. Not aggressively, just enough to stop the flow. Because he had already heard enough versions of explanations to understand which ones were built to repair reality and which ones were built to delay consequences. "I don't understand how we got here," he said. And that was not a question for her. It was a statement aimed at the collapse of everything he had believed to be stable. Hope stepped forward. Her voice turned desperate now, not strategic. "It was a mistake," she said quickly. "Everything between us, between you and me, it was falling apart. I didn't know what I was doing. I was overwhelmed. A mistake." Liam repeated softly. His eyes sharpened slightly. "A mistake is forgetting a meeting," he said. "Not deciding to build an entire second reality behind someone's back." Hope flinched, because the distinction mattered. And she knew it. Silence expanded between them. Then she whispered, "You don't understand what it's like to feel like you're losing everything at once." Liam stared at her for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I think I'm starting to." But what neither of them realized yet was that the situation had already evolved beyond emotional confrontation. Because Remy Price was not someone who remained passive in the background of disrupted relationships. He observed, and then he acted. The first message arrived 2 days later. Not formal, not subtle, just direct enough to establish intent. A demand. "Meet me. Alone. We need to talk about your wife." Hope read it first, and her reaction was immediate. Panic disguised as control. "No," she said quickly. "Don't respond to him." Liam looked at her. "Why not?" Hope hesitated, because answering that question truthfully would collapse the last layer of denial she still had access to. "He's dangerous," she said finally. Liam did not respond immediately, because danger, in his experience, did not always come in obvious forms. Sometimes it came politely. Sometimes it came emotionally. Sometimes it came disguised as inevitability. Against Hope's wishes, Liam met Remy. Not out of obedience to confrontation, but out of necessity to understand structure. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe on the edge of the city, a location chosen specifically because it did not belong to either world, neither Spencer influence nor Logan familiarity. Remy arrived late, not apologetic, just deliberate. He sat down across from Liam without greeting. And for a moment, neither spoke. Then Remy smiled slightly. "You don't look like a man who believes everything he's been told," he said. Liam studied him carefully. "I don't," he replied. "Good," Remy said. "Then we can skip denial." That word mattered. Denial implied shared awareness of reality beneath disagreement. Liam leaned forward slightly. What do you want? He asked. Remy's answer was immediate. Opportunity. That was the first fracture. Because Liam expected emotion, confession, justification, what he received instead was structure. I know about Forrester Creations, Remy continued. The contracts, the upcoming expansion, the internal hierarchy shifts. Liam narrowed his eyes slightly. And how do you know that? Remy's expression did not change. I pay attention, he said. A pause. Then he added, and I know your wife is involved in decisions she shouldn't be making under current conditions. That sentence landed differently, because it reframed Hope not as victim or deceiver, but as vulnerability. Liam's voice hardened slightly. What are you saying about her? Remy leaned back slightly. I'm saying she's not in control of what she thinks she is, he replied. And neither are you. Silence followed. Then Remy placed a folder on the table. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just precisely. Inside were documents, names, emails, financial transfers, references to internal Forrester negotiations that should not have been accessible outside corporate structure. Liam did not open it immediately, because instinct told him that whatever was inside would not simply inform him. It would alter him. This is leverage, Remy said calmly. And leverage has value. Liam looked at him. You're blackmailing her, he said slowly. Remy did not deny it. I'm offering her protection from consequences, he corrected. That's not protection, Liam said quietly. Remy tilted his head slightly. It is if consequences are worse than cooperation. The realization did not arrive all at once. It accumulated. Hope had not only been hiding a relationship, she had been entangled in structural dependency. And Remy was not a spontaneous participant. He was positioned, strategic, and increasingly embedded. When Liam returned home, Hope immediately sensed something had changed. He did not show her the folder. Not yet. Instead, he asked one question. Who was he really? Hope's expression tightened instantly. I told you, she said quickly. He's just someone from my past. Stop, Liam interrupted quietly. The word was not loud, but it carried finality. Hope stopped, and in that pause, something inside her collapsed slightly, because she realized he no longer believed narrative. Only evidence. Remy is threatening you, Liam said. Hope looked away. That's not what this is, she whispered. But Liam shook his head slowly. I think it is. What followed was not resolution. It was escalation. Because once external pressure enters a relationship already destabilized by internal contradiction, alignment becomes nearly impossible. Hope began to unravel under dual forces. Remy's demands, Liam's scrutiny, and her own internal collapse between truth and survival. Remy escalated slowly, not violently, not recklessly, but deliberately. He began increasing pressure. Messages became more specific, requests more structured, until finally the demand crystallized. A position at Forrester Creations. Not entry-level, not temporary. Strategic placement, visibility, access, control, and in exchange, silence. Hope refused at first, but refusal under pressure is not static. It weakens over time, and Remy knew that. Liam, meanwhile, had stopped reacting emotionally. He had begun investigating, not through official channels, but through structural analysis, connections, historical ties, financial records, and what he found began to shift the entire understanding of Remy Price's presence in Los Angeles. Remy was not new. He had history, intersections with logistics firms connected to Spencer Enterprises, indirect ties to shipping routes previously under dispute, even minor financial overlaps with intermediary accounts linked to past Forrester supply chains. Nothing overt, but enough to suggest proximity to power structures far beyond personal relationships. When Liam confronted Bill Spencer with fragments of what he had found, Bill's reaction was immediate seriousness. This isn't random, Bill said after reviewing the information. Liam nodded. I know. Bill leaned back slightly. Then someone placed him near her, he said. Liam hesitated. That implication mattered more than anything else so far, because it transformed Remy from opportunist into instrument. and instruments are rarely self-directed. Meanwhile, Hope stood at the center of increasing collapse. Remy's pressure intensified, Liam's distance widened, and Forrester Creations began to feel less like a professional environment and more like a system she was slowly being excluded from. Positions shifted. Conversations changed tone. People observed her differently, not openly, but structurally, as if uncertainty had begun attaching itself to her presence. And somewhere in all of this, Liam made a decision. Not emotional, not impulsive, strategic. He would uncover everything about Remy Price. Not just for hope, not just for truth, but because he had begun to understand something fundamental. This was no longer a relationship problem. It was a system problem. And systems, once destabilized, do not resolve themselves. They either collapse or they are restructured. And as Liam Spencer stepped deeper into that investigation, he had no way of knowing yet that every layer he uncovered would not just expose Remy Price. It would begin to expose something far more dangerous. The possibility that Hope Logan's secrets were not isolated, but connected to something far larger than